Before I start retouching a file in Photoshop, I start with the raw conversion. I don't do much in raw conversion, so I don't like to explain you the whole dialogue here. I just like to show you what I do in raw conversion. If I do a basic raw conversion, I fix the temperature, the exposure, and the sharpness of the picture. That's the three things what I do in the basic raw conversion. When I do some crazy raw conversions for a unique style, for getting some details, I fix some more things, but what I do there I like to show you later. Let's start with the basic raw conversion. I like to start with the exposure. So I click the Alt key. Then I can see the whites in the picture, the pure whites. And this photography was okay from the exposure. If you don't like to click the Alt key, you can click on this little icon right here. Then you can see in red color your highlights, your pure whites. Then you can fix the exposure. And the next thing what I do is the temperature. But I don't like to do too much right here. And the most of my pictures are a color cast. That means the temperature here is not so important, because in the most of my pictures I adding a color cast. But adding a color cast, I do it in Photoshop. So what I do here in temperature, just fix a little bit the temperature like that. A little more warm here, a little more warm tone, and that's all. And the third thing what I do is sharpening the image. If you like to sharpen the image and if you like to see the before after, you have to zoom in to 100%, and then you can see the before after when you sharpening the image right here. So it depends on the size of the picture. What I do very often is I set the radius here to 0.7 and the amount around 60 or 70. But it depends on the picture. When you now click the preview, you can see the before after. And I know that many of you think you have to sharpen at the end of your workflow. You can do that. I prefer sharpening the image when I start retouching in the raw conversion, because I think all the informations of this raw file are here in the raw conversion. If you are work later in Photoshop, you use some filters and much more, you don't have the original information of the raw file. So here is the point where all begins, and here I do some basic sharpening. Not too much, that's important. Don't do too much sharpening right here. Okay, I use here for this picture about 60. Preview the before after, and then you can see the sharpness in the picture. And I don't like to miss that. Okay, that's what I do in the basic raw conversion. And now the most important thing. We have here the workflow options. If you click on that, you will see some different kind of things what you can change. It depends on the picture what I use, and it depends if I work for a picture on my own portfolio for the World Wide Web or if I work for a picture for the client. The most of the time I choose the space sRGB. It's a little bit smaller than Adobe RGB. Some clients like to have the file in Adobe RGB, so of course I work in Adobe RGB. But if I work for my own portfolio, I choose sRGB. For me, it's absolutely enough. So I choose here sRGB. And most of the time I choose here 8 bits. Also, when I work for some clients, they like to have a 16 bits RGB file, no problem. In 16 bits, you can't use all filters. And you can't upload a 16-bit files in the World Wide Web. So you have to choose with what you like to work. I choose here 8 bits. 8 bits are much faster and your file is not so big. And that's an important part for me. If I don't have the best hardware, I have to keep an eye on it if I work in 8 bits or 16 bits. Okay, the size and the resolution, you can change them all here in this workflow options. But I think the most important part in the workflow options is this little part here, open in Photoshop as a smart object. If you click on them, then you will see open image right here turns into open object. Now it's open image. If you click on them, you have open object. Here, right here, you can decide how Photoshop will open the raw file. If you choose Smart Object, then you have one big advance I like to show you. If I open this raw file as a Smart Object in Photoshop, I can always go back into the raw dialog with clicking double on the little icon right here. So I click double right here and I'm back in the raw file. So all my sliders, all my changes here are non-destructive. And that's a very, very big advance for you. So what I do, I click this little icon right here, and then every raw file turns into a smart object when I open it in Photoshop. If you don't like to click this little icon right here, you can also press the Shift key, and then the icon here turns into open as an object. But I prefer doing that in these settings, so I don't have to think about it, and all files I bring into Photoshop are a smart object. And that's a big, big, big advance for you. So you can click OK. And when you think, okay, the temperature is not good in this picture, you can always go back with double clicking on this little icon. Now you are back in the raw dialog. You can change the temperature, maybe like that. Okay. You will show that file to the client and the client said, no, I don't like that color. Okay, no problem. Just double click on that. Fix the temperature, maybe a little bit like that. Click OK. And then you can keep on going with your work in Photoshop. So that's the basic raw conversion, what I do in Photoshop. You see, that's not much. Sometimes I play a little bit with recovery, a little bit with the fill light, but normally I just do these 3 things: sharpening the image, temperature, and exposure. That's the most important things, what I do in the basic raw conversion.